Tradcast Express.
Tradcast Express. It's Thursday, March 2nd, 2017, and this podcast is back after I had to recover from some illness. Well, with Francis, there's always plenty going on, and today is no different. First, now that we're coming close to the 4-year anniversary of the election of Jorge Bergoglio as Pope Francis, various journalists and bloggers are taking a moment to blow off some steam about the guy. An interesting piece was posted yesterday at lifesitenews.com by Pete Buklinski that basically talks about how the election of Francis was engineered by various ultra-modernist forces to give the Novus Ordo Church a complete makeover. Unfortunately, as we've mentioned several times before in our blog at novusordowatch.org, people's acknowledgement of the evils of Jorge Bergoglio comes at a terrible price. The price of denying the truth about what took place the decades before Francis came on the scene. Buklinski writes, quote, "The election of Jorge Mario Bergoglio followed upon 35 years of clear, solid, orthodox teaching under the distinguished pontificates of Saint John Paul II and Benedict XVI." Unquote. Wow. Now, this could not be further from the truth. What we're witnessing here is a complete whitewashing of the time from John the 23rd through Benedict the 16th. As we've said before in our blog, perhaps Francis' job is only to make his 5 predecessors of unhappy memory look orthodox. And by comparison, they do. By comparison. But that's obviously not the right standard by which to judge these things. We don't judge the purity of drinking water by comparing it to sewage. Then, this is absolutely hilarious. Cardinal Coco Palmerio has now proposed that we reflect on this rigid notion of valid versus invalid sacraments. You see, this is causing a real problem for ecumenism with Lutherans and Anglicans, since they don't have a valid priesthood. Well, the Novus Ordos don't either, actually, but they think they do, right? Officially, they do. So, Coco Palmerio suggests that it's time to reflect on this issue. And you know how it is. Famous last words, right? Let's reflect on this. That's usually the first step to modernist destruction. They threaten to reflect, i.e., rethink a traditional teaching. Well, anyway, here's what Coco said verbatim in an interview conducted by Ed Penton of the National Non-Catholic Register, released on March 1st. Quote, "We say everything is valid, nothing is valid. Maybe we have to reflect on this concept of validity or invalidity. The Second Vatican Council said there is a true communion, even if it is not yet definitive or full. You see, they made a concept not so decisive, either all or nothing. There's a communion that is already good, but some elements are missing. But if you say some things are missing and that therefore there is nothing, you err. There are pieces missing, but there is already a communion, but it is not full communion. The same thing can be said, or something similar, of the validity or invalidity of ordination. I said let's think about it. It's a hypothesis. Maybe there is something, or maybe there's nothing. A study, a reflection." Unquote. It's actually quite hilarious how, after this drivel, he concludes it by saying maybe there's something, maybe there's nothing, when the whole point of what he just said was that you don't have to have only something or nothing, but there could be something in between. Anyway, get this. After Vatican II declared that the true church exists in elements in other religions, and Francis insisted that matrimony can exist in elements in fornication and adultery, Coco Palmerio now takes it one step further and argues that we can have elements of validity in the sacraments. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to partially valid sacraments conferred by people who possess elements of the priesthood. Well, you know, this elements thing is quite the rave right now, actually. I mean, Benedict XVI basically claims to be holding on to some elements of the papacy, right? While Francis enjoys them in their fullness. Folks, let me tell you something. Have no fear to be a SedeVacantist, because if this modernist circus in the Vatican is the true religion, then what the heck does anything matter, really? I mean, then you might as well be a SedeVacantist. If fornication is marriage and sacraments can be partially valid and all that, then believe me, SedeVacantism won't damn you to hell either. There's lots more to talk about today, but we'll have to continue tomorrow because this is an express podcast. So just make sure you tune in again in 24 hours. By the way, today is the 141st birthday of Pope Pius XII. It's also the 78th anniversary of his election as Pope, the last Pope for the time being. Yes, he was elected on his 63rd birthday in 1939. Tradcast Express is a production of Novus Ordo Watch. Check us out at tradcast.org, and if you like what we're doing, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution at novusordowatch.org/donate.
Tradcast Express.
Tradcast Express, it's Friday, March 3rd, 2017, and we've got lots to talk about. Yesterday, on March 2nd, Francis gave a lengthy reflection on growing in faith to the presbyters in the Diocese of Rome, and you know, that's always a lot of fun when the guy who has no faith explains to everyone else how to grow in it. Anyway, it was a bunch of drivel. Here are some excerpts from Vatican Radio. Quote, "Faith feeds on and is nourished by memory, the memory of the covenant which the Lord has made with us. He is the God of our fathers and grandfathers. He is not a God of the last moment, a God without a family history, a God which, to respond to each new paradigm, should throw out precedents as if they were old and ridiculous. The more lucid the memory of the past, the more clear the future opens up, because it is possible to see the truly new path and distinguish it from the path already taken, which has never brought one anywhere meaningful." Unquote. When you hear that, I mean, doesn't your faith grow already? He also spoke of how faith can progress backwards in a revolutionary return to the roots. And then he got into hope, which, he said, opens faith to the surprises of God. Actually, hope has nothing to do with any surprises. It's the virtue by which we're assured of God's grace and spiritual assistance to attain eternal life. Minor difference, I know. Anyway, here's what else Francis said about hope. Quote, "Faith is sustained and progresses thanks to hope." Funny, didn't he just say that's what memory does? "Hope is the anchor anchored in the heavens, in the transcendent future, of which the temporal future, considered in a linear form, is only an expression. Hope is that which gives dynamism to the rearwards-looking glance of faith, which conduces one to find new things in the past, in the treasures of the memory, so that one can encounter the same God which hopes to see into the future." Unquote. For goodness sake. Look, I'll spare you from what he said about discernment, okay? All right, a big story that's making the rounds on the internet right now comes from the Italian journalist and Vatican insider Antonio Socci, who, by the way, predicted the resignation of Benedict XVI as far back as 2011, and he was scorned for it. In the February 28th edition of Libero, Socci writes in his column that there are about a dozen or so influential Novus Ordo cardinals who, although they voted for Bergoglio in the conclave 4 years ago, now want him to step down because they're afraid he's running the modernist church completely into the ground. Here's what Socci says, taking a translation from an article that appeared in the Times of London. Quote, 4 years after Benedict XVI's renunciation, Bergoglio's arrival on the scene, the situation of the Catholic Church has become explosive, perhaps really on the edge of a schism, which could be even more disastrous than Luther's. Unquote. Now, this is the curious part. Sochi says we're not talking about conservative-leaning cardinals who've long opposed Francis, but about big-time liberals. One unnamed Vatican expert said, quote, "A good number of the majority that voted for Bergoglio in 2013 have come to regret their decision, but I don't think it's plausible that members of the hierarchy will pressure the Pope to resign. Those who know him know it would be useless. He has a very authoritarian streak. He won't resign until he has completed his revolutionary reforms, which are causing enormous harm," unquote. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here you can see very well that everyone is treating the Novus Ordo Church like a human institution, because that's exactly what it is. The Catholic Church, by contrast, is a divine institution which is miraculously preserved by God, even in the event that an unworthy man should be chosen pope. In an allocution given to cardinals on March 20th, 1900, Pope Leo XIII said the following, quote, "The Church has received from on high a promise which guarantees her against every human weakness. What does it matter that the helm of the symbolic bark has been entrusted to feeble hands when the divine pilot stands on the bridge where, though invisible, he is watching and ruling? Blessed be the strength of his arm and the multitude of his mercies," unquote. And there is the difference the real Catholic papacy makes. Tradcast Express is a production of Novus Ordo Watch. Check us out at tradcast.org. And if you like what we're doing, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution at novusordowatch.org/donate.
Tradcast Express.
Tradcast Express. It's Friday, March 10th, 2017. Well, the party is over. Today, Francis returned to the Vatican from his Lenten retreat, and it looks like the Swiss guards didn't get a chance to change the locks in the meantime, so it's going to be back to business as usual. News from Rome today. Archbishop, so-called, Bruno Forte, who, by the way, was ordained a bishop in 2004 by none other than Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, announced that giving communion to unrepentant public adulterers is an act of, quote, obedience to God's mercy, unquote. See, that's it. For 2,000 years, the church just wasn't obedient to God and didn't understand a thing about mercy. Well, good thing we finally have Francis and Bruno to straighten us all out. We live in such times of grace. Then, the biggest story making the rounds right now comes from LifeSiteNews.com. Vatican Cardinal enlists the help of the SSPX to fight the modernists. That is the headline, and that story is dated March 9th, 2017. Here is an excerpt from that story. Quote, "In an explosive homily delivered Sunday, the leader of the Society of St. Pius X, SSPX, said the prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith wants the SSPX to be fully reconciled to help fight modernists in the church. Bishop Bernhard Fallet reported the comments of Cardinal Gerhard Müller asking the SSPX to join his fight against the modernists, according to the SSPX's USA district," unquote. Now, this is just rich, okay? And the problem here isn't LifeSite News because they just reported what Bishop Fallet said. No, the problem is Bishop Fallet. In the very same sermon in which Fallet wants to make you believe that Cardinal Müller is interested in fighting the modernists, he says that in 2013, Müller had the decree of excommunication ready against the SSPX, and the only reason it didn't happen is because Francis refused to sign it. So this is the cardinal who now supposedly wants the SSPX to fight the modernists? Does Bishop Fallet ever listen to his own sermons? Now, remember, Fillet keeps insisting that the SSPX has not changed and that Rome has to accept them as they are. So there would have been no reason for Müller to change his mind, at least not according to Bishop Fillet. Besides, irony of ironies, Müller himself is a modernist. You know, here at Novus Ordo Watch, we have a very nasty habit, and that's that we remember things. You know who accused Müller of heresy just a few years ago? It was the SSPX. On September 18th, 2012, and this was when Benedict XVI was still at the helm, Father Franz Schmidberger, then the German district superior of the Society of St. Pius X, said in an interview that then Archbishop Gerhard Müller was, quote, almost antagonistic, unquote, towards the SSPX. And he would know because Müller was Bishop of Regensburg, Germany, before Benedict XVI transferred him to Rome. And so Müller has a history of opposing the SSPX in his German diocese. But Father Schmidberger added in the interview what concerned him even more was Müller's, quote, heterodox teaching. What's that heterodox teaching? Well, Müller denies transubstantiation, he denies the perpetual virginity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and he denies the bodily resurrection of Christ as they have been defined. And you can find the evidence for that on our website at novusordowatch.org. Just use the search box. So this is the Gerhard Ludwig Müller that Bishop Felley is now promoting as the anti-modernist who wants to enlist the help of the SSPX. Whom is he kidding? And by the way, in 2013, Bishop Felley denounced Francis himself as a genuine modernist. Remember? So what I'd like to know is, does Cardinal Müller want the SSPX to help him fight himself only, or himself and Francis? That is the question. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, the Remnant has published a thing or two critical of SedeVacantism. First, there's a brand new episode out of the Remnant Underground entitled Papolatry R.I.P. Pope Ignites Counter-Revolution. And in the last 6 or 7 minutes, Michael Matt goes after SedeVacantist and once again repeats his "what does it matter whether Francis is a pope or anti-pope" objection.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what label.
Well, we answered that at great length in Tradcast number 16, published on December 24th, 2016. You can find it at tradcast.org. But in our next Tradcast, number 17, we will respond directly to what Michael Matt says in that new video. Then, Remnant contributor Chris Jackson published a response to our rebuttal of his blog post that attempted to show that Pope Clement XIV's suppression of the Jesuits in the 1700s was resisted by faithful Catholics. Now, his new post, published on March 7th, is entitled Novus Ordo Watch Excommunicates Archbishop for Resisting Pope in 1700s. And folks, that title right there is a good indication of what a sloppy writer Mr. Jackson is, because what the title should have been is Novus Ordo Watch claims Archbishop who resisted Pope in 1700s incurred automatic excommunication. But of course, that's not as catchy of a title, so the facts had to once again give way to rhetoric. And that's what you get at the Remnant, at least when it comes to SedeVacantism. So in any case, we'll respond to that post as well on our blog, but I don't know exactly when yet, but it'll be sooner rather than later. Oh, and guess what? Our March donor incentives are now out. It's Lent, and almsgiving, if done with the right disposition, is a very salutary practice. And we've got some great gifts for those who make a qualifying donation. It's one of those if you give, we give deals. Here's what we're offering in the month of March. Depending on how much you donate, you can get any one of the following books or sets of books for free. AA 1025, Memoirs of a Communist Infiltration into the Church. And that's a diary of a communist who had become a Catholic priest, I think in the 1930s, in order to destroy the church from within. Then we have The Passion and the Death of Jesus Christ by St. Alphonsus Liguori. It's perfect for Lent. Very, very beautiful reading. Then we have Papal Error, a defense of popes said to have erred in faith by St. Robert Bellarmine. Then we have The Problems with the Other Sacraments by Ramakumara Swami. That's a book that analyzes how the Novus Ordo Church changed the other sacraments, meaning the sacraments other than the Holy Eucharist. Then we have On Divine Tradition by Cardinal Johann Franzelin. It's a brand new first ever English translation of that work. Also, we offer The Church of Christ, a collection of essays by Monsignor Joseph Clifford Fenton, as well as The Decrees of the Ecumenical Councils. It's a 2-volume set. It's a bilingual edition. It's every single ecumenical council of the Catholic Church in the original language, whether that be Greek or Latin, with an English translation. It even includes Vatican II. Yeah, you can just ignore that. 2 more items. We have the Paul Preuss Manual of Dogmatic Theology. That's a complete 12-volume set. And finally, the complete 5-volume set, The Papal Encyclicals, 1740 to 1981. Pope Benedict XIV was the first pope to write an encyclical. And so what you have in this collection is every single papal encyclical ever written in English. And it even includes a bunch of Novus Ordo encyclicals from 1958 to 81. That's volume 5. You can just junk that. So get rewarded for helping to make Novus Ordo Watch possible. And it's tax deductible, too, if you're in the United States. Just go to novusordowatch.org/donate. novusordowatch.org/donate for details on all this and to make a donation. Tradcast Express is a production of Novus Ordo Watch. Check us out at tradcast.org and novusordowatch.org.